Hello and welcome to Mirror Talk Podcast. Your moment of greatness starts now. This week's guest is an international bestseller. He's a dynamic entrepreneur who is widely recognized as one of the world's leading experts on disruption and innovation. His experience comes from working with visionaries such as Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, and hundreds of other successful entrepreneurs. How are you doing today, Jay?
Fantastic. Thanks for having me on the show.
Thank you so much for joining me today on this episode of Mirror Talk Podcast. You're a man of many honors, many awards. You have written a lot of articles in the Wall Street journals. You've held a lot of industrial keynotes and major speeches. You have been quoted in the New York Times and even more, even other articles and other magazines. But for my friends and for me, myself, and for our listeners out there, can you tell us about yourself and your journey so far?
Sure. So I'm no different than everybody listening. I bought into the belief that if you go to school and you get good grades, you live happily ever after. Got out of college and there were no jobs. So that started my journey on if there's no jobs, then you got to figure it out and start your own business. And I realized from doing it again and again that there's a pattern. And when dozens of your friends become self-made billionaires with a B, you realize that anyone can do it. You don't have to come from money. You don't have to live in a first world country. You don't have to live in a major city. We're all one click away from 7 billion people. So I've started the first auction, which became eBay. I worked with Reid Hoffman to launch LinkedIn. And then I've been on the other side and run multinational companies with hundreds of thousands of employees. So I've seen it from both sides, and it can be taught. You only need 2 things to be successful in life: insight and perseverance. I can teach you how to find the insight and perseverance in my new book, Future Proofing You. I also teach you how to turn perseverance into passion. So that's my journey. I'm just here to pay it forward and help people make their journey easier.
Yes, that's great. I'm still going to come back to the question of insight and perseverance, but you described, or you are known as a serial disruptor. What does that mean? What does it mean to be a serial disruptor?
That means I always try to go and do something new that displaces something. So I put the first video on a computer. I created advertising on the internet. I did the first video on demand on cable. So all of these things, the first album that you could download.
Yes.
So what I realized early on is if you apply for a job or you want to do a business that somebody else is doing, you're going to have competition. And I can guarantee you there's somebody with more experience. And I know on any day there's somebody smarter than me, better looking than me, better connected than me, richer than me. There's just some guy that's better. I hate him. But if you do something that no one else is doing, if you're unique, by definition, you're the best in the world at what you're doing. So it's much easier to start something new. So in Future Proofing You, this young man wanted to do social media. Well, 40 million other people do social media. How are you going to make a living? You don't know anybody. You're not going to get hired by multinationals. You're just basically one step away from homeless. So I said, look at what's in the news. What's something new? What are people talking about? And be the social media expert for that. Then you get your first customer, and that's what they call in MBA speak, a case study. Now you prove that you're good at that, and you get the rest. So the customers that were paying them $200 a month in the beginning, it was now signing up customers by month 2 that were paying $30,000 a month.
Yeah.
Same skill set, different way of looking at filling a void. So that's one of the 12 truths: fill a void.
Fill a void, yes. But before we jump into the 12 truths, you've started already. You have this proven process because you mentored a broken millennial to go from being on welfare to becoming a self-made millionaire in 1 year. And in your book, Future Proofing You, you explain like this method. You explain other principles that you use in the process of changing the life of this young man. And this book contains 12 truths for creating opportunity, maximizing wealth, and controlling your destiny in an uncertain world for everybody, basically. So you've mentioned it earlier, but are there like other things that inspired you into writing this book and releasing it to the world, for everyone to have a taste or to make the secret reveal to the world? Yeah.
My first book, Disrupt You, was really one of the most enjoyable experiences of my life. Um, Everybody thinks of changing the world. Most people don't realize that it starts with changing yourself. So if you can change that voice in your head that says you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you can't do it, once you change that, everything falls into place. So the book became a huge international success. It's in a bunch of languages. It comes out this year in Urdu, Icelandic, Polish. I mean, it's crazy. And when I was a CEO of like a NASDAQ CEO, you get your inbox is, I hate you, here's a problem, put out this fire. I mean, it's miserable. When you change people's lives, you get what I call love letters. I get emails every day from somebody that the book has changed them. But occasionally I get an email, usually from a millennial, that says, this is all motivational, but I could never do it. And I'm like, why am I not able to reach that person? I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing this to pay it forward and help others. So I decided to put my reputation on the line and said, could I do an experiment? Could I take somebody with no safety net, no infrastructure, no way to see what's in themselves, and get them so that they could see that it's them and that they can make it happen? And so this young man, his name is Vin Clancy, I actually needed him to do the most important thing, which was the first truth, which is to have a growth mindset. And if you don't start off with a growth mindset, you'll get nowhere. Because everybody has problems, but with a growth mindset, you see that problems are actually opportunities in disguise. Because entrepreneurs don't sell things, they solve things. Solve a problem for a few people, you have friends. Solve for 1 million, become wealthy. Solve for 1 billion, you change the world. So the way I tricked Vin into having that growth mindset, because I didn't have time for him to organically get it, was there's a principle called the Pygmalion effect. A professor went to school, tested all the kids, told the teachers 3 of the students would be super learners that year. End of the year, the school takes a test, and those 3 kids excelled everybody. But the professor lied. He just picked those 3 names at random. But by telling the students and the teachers that they were special, they internalized it. So when I met Vin, I told him I interviewed over 100 candidates, and he was the only one with all the attributes to be a self-made millionaire. When in fact, I only interviewed Vin. So he sat there and said, if this old dude believes it, I'll go along with it. When at the end of his first month, he made $60,000, he was unstoppable.
Wow, that's awesome. That's a big trick. Having a growth mindset and having this belief that, or having this understanding that entrepreneurs are made to solve problems. Yeah, that's really good. So can you walk us through the 12 truths, the 12 truths that are listed in the book? Can you walk us through these 12 truths for controlling our destinies in an uncertain world like now?
Well, we'd be here all day if we do all of them. So let me just hit on a couple that might not seem obvious to people.
Yes.
One of the ones that really bugs me about all these so-called gurus that are online is they all say fear isn't real. Fear is in your head, fear is make-believe, forget fear, overcome fear. That's a lie. We are hardwired. We are biologically wired to have fear. The only reason any of us are here is because our ancestor, when they saw the saber-toothed tiger, ran, okay? The guy who didn't have any fear was lunch. So people that don't want to start a business are afraid of losing their job, afraid of losing money, afraid of losing other people's money, afraid of being embarrassed, afraid of failing. All these fears stop most people in their tracks. And those fears are real. But if you're walking down the street and a bus was coming barreling towards you, are you thinking about those fears? No, you're thinking about the fear of dying. So you jump out of the way of the bus. So you can prioritize fear. So if you can prioritize fear, what should you really be afraid of? Well, if you're at a job that doesn't allow you to live the way you want, and you're not learning and growing, you're trading a day of your life, a week of your life, a month of your life, a year of your life. You wake up one day, you gave up your entire life, just like being hit by that bus. For what? Because you were afraid of what somebody would think? That's the big fear of giving up and wasting this precious time that we have on the planet. But now here's where fear becomes your friend. If you can agree that we all now have fear, turn the table. Whoever you're trying to sell has the same fears. Fear is an instinct that reacts before rational thought. So if you can frame your selling in a manner of fear, you'll get a better result. So when I was very young, I had a big meeting with the CEO of Pepsi. This was going to change my company's future. This was going to be amazing. I knew everything I could going into that meeting. For me, it was the most important meeting of my life. For the CEO, it was the only thing stopping him from going to lunch. So he's not engaged. No amount of rational discussion will get him engaged. He's thinking about lunch. But when I start off the meeting by saying, thank you for meeting me today, because tomorrow I'm in Atlanta, which is the headquarters of Coca-Cola, now fear starts trickling in. If his competition goes and he had the shot to do it, he could get fired by the board. This could affect his self-preservation. Now his awareness is heightened. So I explained the 3 fears that executives have and how to leverage those. So that's one of the 12 truths. One of the other ones, which I didn't touch on at all in Disrupt You, is there's a myth of the self-made man or the self-made woman, that somehow successful people did it on their own, as if they were, came straight out of the earth and did it all by themselves. That's a myth. That's a lie. There are no self-made people. Don't fly solo. That's truth number 8. You're going to need a series of mentors. The world is changing at a dynamic pace that no amount of education or training can prepare you for. But yet, there are thousands of people out there that would like to help you succeed. So I teach people how to use LinkedIn and other tools to get a mentor. And you don't get a mentor by emailing a stranger, will you be my mentor? That's like walking to a bar and say, will you have my baby? It doesn't work that way.
No.
But if you can start a dialogue, if you look through their profiles of the people that will be open to this, then you start a dialogue, and you may have a lifelong mentor without ever using the M word. So that's another important truth. And then post-pandemic, there's a new advantage that has now come that most people aren't aware of. If giant corporations could now have 80, 90, 100% of their employees working from home, you no longer need that big office. You don't need that expensive overhead. You can run a virtual company just like my young man in the book did. But here's the new advantage. Up until recently, when you started a company, you had to hire the best people within 10 kilometers of you or 20 kilometers. Now you can hire the best people in the world.
Yeah.
You used to have to be in a major city, which was expensive to live, and have to hire other people with expenses. Now you can live anywhere, or you can be a digital nomad. My best friend's son, he's an engineer, has a full-time job with Google. 1 month he'll be in Hawaii, 1 month he'll be in Thailand, and if he wants to run with the bulls in Spain. You don't have to wait till you're old and gray to see this beautiful planet. So you can have a better work-life balance. And remote workers have less turnover. They're willing to pay less pay to have that privilege of not wasting 2 hours a day commuting, and to have the flexibility to take care of children or seniors or whatever it might be. They cost you less, there's less turnover, and they're 40% more productive. So, and I also listed in Future-Proofing You 22 free software tools to run your remote business. They start off, free until you get to a certain size business. So, huge advantage for starting a company today.
Would you advise us to first read Disrupt You before reading Future-Proofing You, or you could first read this new book?
Yeah, so if it was a college course, the introductory course would be Disrupt You, because it really lets you work through all this stuff internally. Future-Proofing You is really the steps. There's a series that every business and every entrepreneur that's successful takes.
Yes.
They don't teach it in school for some reason. School was set up to make employees. Our curriculum was set up during the Industrial Revolution. Let them know how to read enough and how to do enough math, but not to think. Well, there are no more secure jobs. If the pandemic didn't teach you that, I spent 5 years traveling the world telling everybody, whether by choice or circumstance, every career gets disrupted. I don't have to make that argument anymore. Everybody got disrupted. And this won't be the only giant disruption in our lifetime.
Yeah.
So you can wait to see what happens, but here's the secret. Disruption isn't about what happens to you. It's about how you respond to what happens to you. The 150 wealthiest people on the planet doubled their net wealth in 2020 during the pandemic. Let that sink in. Didn't double what they earn in a year. They doubled their life savings. They doubled their wealth. Every 48 hours, there's a new self-made billionaire. What are they doing different? Can it be taught? Absolutely. You only need two things, insight and perseverance. Everything else can be higher, right?
Yes.
You've written the same amount of computer code as Steve Jobs, and he built $1 trillion tech company.
Yeah.
Steve wasn't an engineer.
Yes.
He wrote zero, okay? So people have to start looking at it from that point of view, and you will fail, and you will fail again and again. I mean, think about it. Jeff Bezos lost money with Amazon year after year after year after year and came out the other side of it as the richest man in the world. So people don't understand where money comes from. That's the other thing I try to explain in Future Proofing You.
Yes.
Money doesn't come from the old, I buy an apple for $1 and I sell it to you for $2, so I make $1. That's how it was taught in school. Mathematically accurate, but not true. Here's what's not true about it. In game theory, that's called zero-sum game. Think of poker. You can only win as much money as there's chips on the table.
Yeah.
So you either have money or I have money. Or he takes the job or I get the job. Or they get the raise or I get the raise. Or that country steals our jobs. Or it suddenly becomes this dog-eat-dog. We're all fighting over this one pile of money. But if I'm starting a new company and I say to you, I'll sell you 10% for $10,000, and you say yes, now what do I have? I have $10,000 in cash and $90,000 in stock. I can hire people with that. I can buy stuff. I can merge stuff. That's how I can take a startup and 18 months later sell it for $200 million. That money wasn't made by a government. That money comes out of thin air. And so most of the wealth that we're seeing is being created that way. Not the scrimp and save and invest and save. And someday when you're old, you'll have money, but you'll be too old to do anything with it.
Earlier at the beginning, you said you have to, develop insights and perseverance. So can you tell me how to develop the right mindset and the right insight to become successful in life?
So mindset is everything. So I start off each morning, I look in the mirror and I say two things. Today can be better than yesterday, and I have the power to make it so. Because whatever you were yesterday, whatever happened to you yesterday, whoever you thought you were when you went to bed, you don't have to be that today. And don't waste your future thinking about your past that can't change. As far as insight, I have a technique in the book called 3 problems a day for 30 days. It's just what it says. Write down on a piece of paper 3 problems in your life and do this every day for a month. The first day, it's easy. There was traffic, there was this, whatever. By day 2 or 3, most people go, I don't have any more problems. It's not that you don't have any problems. It's that you live your life on autopilot, that when you run into obstacles, you just assume that's the way it's always been. A gentleman that read my first book, he was taking his medicine in the morning, and the phone rang, and then he got off the phone and goes, ooh, did I take the pill or didn't I? Oh, that's a problem.
Yeah.
He thought about it. He took a little watch that cost like a nickel, put it on the lid, so when you close the bottle, it sets it at 0. He can look at the bottle, oh, opened it 3 minutes ago, or oh, I opened it 8 hours ago. Then he added Bluetooth, so you know whether grandma took her pills. Then he sold them all over the world. It's those simple moments. In Future Proofing You, I have a story that's amazing. Every parent can relate to this. It's the middle of the week. Your child has to do some project for school. They're writing on the poster board, and they mess it up. They go, Mommy, please take me to the store. Please buy me another sheet. And you go, okay, so you get out there at 10 o'clock at night. You buy another piece. But before this mom gave it to her, she took a ruler and made little thin lines on it so that her daughter could write straight letters. And in the morning, she said, why don't they sell poster board with little lines on it? Make a long story short, she got a patent. She makes about $5 million. Wow. No employees, just solving a problem.
Yes.
That's where it all starts. And if you need an acronym, my acronym for doing all this in the book is MOVE, M-O-V-E. Mindset, obstacle, find a void, and then execute.
Mindset, obstacle, find the void, and execute. So, but in the journey of becoming, successful in life, there are a lot of obstacles that will occur. You made mention of the example of Jeff Bezos, for example, failing over and over or making losses with Amazon before it became successful. So What are some of these obstacles that one is supposed to expect, and what can I do, or what can we do to overcome these obstacles?
So the first thing is you have to understand that there's nothing wrong with failing. There's a difference between failing and failure. Failing is figuring out what doesn't work. Failure is throwing in the towel and giving up. A toddler doesn't stand there and go one day, today I shall walk across the room. They try it, they fall down, they try it again, they fall down, and they figure it out. When you play a video game, you don't sit down and make it all the way to the end. You hit some obstacle, bam, 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 okay, you hammer it, you get past it, you're feeling good, and then there's another one. That's what life is. That's what having a business is. So expect failing. If you don't have mistakes, you'll never grow and learn. The thing is to not say, oh, I failed because I'm not good enough. That imbues that somehow the universe has some rules that you have to apply to. It's, I failed because I learned something that doesn't work. So now let me try a different approach. Give you a great example. Before swiping to get laid, people had computer dating. And 10 years ago, computer dating was a still picture, and you read about the person, and you emailed back and forth. Well, with broadband was coming out, 3 engineers sat down and said, we're going to make a dating website with video. We're going to make so much money. You'll get to see the people, hear their voice, their smile, whatever. So the site was called Tune In Hookup. And they built a great site. And the first video that went up there was a guy, I can't make this up, standing in front of the elephant cage at the zoo, talking about why you should go out with them. Yeah. So the site had a problem. No one wanted to date these losers. They did everything in the business plan perfectly, but nobody wants to date these losers. But they looked at the data. They looked for the insight. And they noticed something that wasn't in the business plan. Nobody wanted to date these people, but they sure wanted to show their friends these videos. So they changed the name of Tune In Hookup to YouTube and became billionaires without a penny in revenue.
Oh.
Twitter was a music site. I can go on and on.
Yeah.
So it's the process of failing that gives you insights. The only competitive advantage any company has in the 21st century is getting insights from their customers faster than the competition.
Insight is very important, and also learning from your failures. That's what I understood now. Like taking the data you have and reforming it into something better. Yes, I'm making progress from that. Wow. So from your experiences of working with the Pope, for example, or President Bill Clinton, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, and other entrepreneurs and world leaders so far, what are some common traits or lessons that could be useful for everyone out there who's trying to work hard to become successful or to become someone in life?
Well, each person that you just mentioned and each person that's listening to your show, I believe has a superpower. And one of the 12 truths in future-proofing you is to identify what makes you unique and lean into that. Some people, I have a friend who's the greatest connector. He figures out how to put people together. He's never had a job, and he makes millions, okay? Reid Hoffman, who wrote the foreword to Future-Proofing You and created LinkedIn and is now on the board of Microsoft, he sees into the future farther than most people. Maybe you are super organized, maybe you're super detailed, maybe whatever it is, lean into that superpower because that's where you'll see your success. And all of these people had different, Bill Clinton, you just had to spend 5 minutes with him to know he was the most charismatic person, more than any movie star, amazing charisma. And that was his center stone. But it doesn't necessarily have to be what you think is the typical strength. For me, I'm dyslexic. When I was a kid, I was basically told I'm stupid, right? But I didn't want to be embarrassed. So when there was a group project, I would raise my hand to be in charge of it. So I could delegate the reading part to this one and the writing part to that one, and basically delegate everything, which is really good training for being a CEO. In fact, 1 out of 3 CEOs of Fortune 500 companies are dyslexic. Richard Branson, dyslexic. Walt Disney, dyslexic. So give you another story from future-proofing you. There was a young man in middle school, and he had ADD. Now, for most people, you'd say that's a negative. Well, the doctors and his parents wanted to treat him with Ritalin and other drugs, and He just didn't like being in a fog all the time from being on these pills. But the only place where he could control his mind was in the swimming pool. So he asked his mom, if I swim every day in the backyard, if I swim every day, can I get off these meds? And the doctors and the mom agreed. So this young man swam every single day. Every single day. By the end of his teenage years, he had 17 Olympic medals. You know him as Michael Phelps. His superpower isn't swimming. His superpower was ADD. So embrace what makes you unique. For in that are the keys to your success.
Yes. Embrace what makes you unique. Wow. Yes.
Be you. Everybody else is taken, right?
Yes. Yes.
The other thing that goes with that is don't live somebody else's dream. Your parents want you to be XYZ. They most likely gave up on their dreams and want to shield you from the pain of failing and trying. Take that safe, steady job. There are no safe, steady jobs. 100-year-old companies go out of business like that.
Yes.
So the only dream that will give you the persistence is a dream that you own. To follow and do what you want. And if you believe that entrepreneurs don't sell things but solve problems, what better way to spend your life than making the world better by solving a problem for others?
Yes.
It doesn't have to be a giant, global warming problem. It can be traffic. It can be the most basic of things. And you'll find the secret to happiness is the helping of others.
Yeah.
And as we get into tough environmental times, sustainable capitalism is a huge growth area. It's where I end future-proofing you, show all the opportunities of really the businesses that are solving problems that really are existential to life on Earth. Yeah. And they can be basic. If an 11-year-old kid can start the idea of banning plastic straws, and you wake up one day and they're gone, imagine what you can do.
For someone like me who needs a mentor, for example, or someone out there who needs a mentor, like what kind of traits should I look forward to in a person before asking or reaching out to that person to become a mentor?
So you want to find somebody that has expertise in the field that you're trying to go into or seed in. You don't want somebody at the top of the pyramid because it's been too long since they were at your level to be in touch with what the world's like. So find somebody that's one rung or two above you in the ladder. Find somebody that's involved in charities. Find somebody that has that giving heart already. Get yourself involved in those same organizations. There's many, entrepreneur groups, Provisors, YPO, EO. And I before the pandemic, I was in Portugal speaking at EO's World Meeting, entrepreneur organization. And there were 1,000 people that flew in from all over the world for the sole purpose of mentoring each other. I mean, it's a powerful thing to see people spend that time and energy to make others successful. But if you have that belief that entrepreneurs create wealth, they don't have that zero-sum game, let's fight it out, then you realize we live in a world of great abundance. Yeah. There may not be equal distribution of that abundance, but the abundance is there. And there's no gatekeepers blocking you from success. There's no banker in the way. There's crowdfunding, there's private equity, there's VCs. I've raised hundreds of millions of dollars for startups. There's always another path. And there is my favorite source of capital, OPM, other people's money. There are corporations who will give you millions of dollars and don't want anything in return. They don't want any equity. They don't want it paid back. Why do they do it? Because you have an idea that not only helps your business, but helps theirs. I'll give you an example. I had to launch Sony's competition to iTunes. Well, iTunes was out there spending $100 million a year marketing. Sony was late to the game. My marketing budget was $0.00. Most people would say, you're failed. But I said, okay, I have a problem. Who else has a problem? And I looked around the world that year, and I came up with two companies. One was McDonald's. Their sales were down for the first time ever because of a movie called Super Size Me about people eating too much and getting fat. So I said, okay, what does my music store have to do with McDonald's having a problem? If I can connect those dots, then McDonald's will advertise my music store. So went to the CEO of McDonald's. I can make you hip and cool again. Buy a Big Mac, get a free track. Put a code on each one.
Yeah.
They did 60 million of TV commercials, put it on every bag, every tray liner. They drove me 20 million paying customers my first week.
Wow.
Didn't cost me a penny. The other company that was in trouble was United Airlines was in bankruptcy. And they wanted some way to let people know they were coming out. Please fly with us again. What the heck does that have to do with the music store? Connect the dots. There's all these people with frequent flyer miles that think they're going to go away. You can now use your frequent flyer miles to get music. But to announce it, I did the first ever concert in the sky. I had Sheryl Crow perform in a plane flight from Chicago to LA, filled the plane with the press. All the national news covered it. Everybody, we shot the whole thing, edited it before the plane landed, handed everybody a DVD so they could do it.
Yeah.
And that concert played on every flight for a month. So millions and millions more customers. Total cost for those two promotions for me, $0.00. I've done this with car companies. I've done this with software companies, entertainment companies, food, almost any CPG. Why not spend somebody else's money? Because somebody else has a problem. Somebody else needs to reach an audience. They've got a budget, but they don't have the ideas.
And there are so many people out there, including myself, who have, this mindset that if I could just reach out to the right person, if I could just, meet with Bill Gates, for example, if I could just reach out to, make the right connection, I will become successful. I will be able to sell my idea to the right people.
So why don't you?
How do you reach out to the right people?
When I was your age, and a different time in history, video games sounded like this: beep, 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 beep. And sound cards were now coming out in computers. And I had a company, I was making video games. And it dawned on me, why don't video games have rock and roll music? This would be killer. Everybody would play PC games. It would be the greatest thing. This is before Guitar Hero, okay?
Yeah.
So I don't know anybody at that point in the music business. I don't know anybody anywhere. I have a little company with 6 people that nobody ever heard of. So I reached out to Bill Gates. I didn't know him. I said, I think this will make more people play PC games, which would be good for Microsoft. I'm writing to you to ask a favor. Would you reach out to David Geffen, the only billionaire in the music industry, and ask him to take a meeting with me? Now, Bill Gates didn't know me. Bill Gates also didn't know David Geffen. But he obviously thought this was a good idea. And when the richest man in the world tells somebody to take a meeting, they take the meeting. And I ended up partnering with Geffen and have a game with Aerosmith and Peter Gabriel and Nirvana and 10 of the biggest rock groups of all time, all because I reached out to that person.
Yeah.
But make sure if you're reaching out to that person, you have a fully formed, executable ask. Otherwise, you're wasting your chance and their time.
There's one point you've made very clear already, and that's the fact that everyone needs a mentor. Everyone needs to, you need people to become successful in life. And this brought me to, I saw one of your articles on the Wall Street Journal. We talked about 3 types of advisors you need. So, but I was thinking I'm going to ask you to, to walk me through this article and tell me the 3 types of advisor that everyone needs.
I think everybody could now search Advisors J. Samit, Wall Street Journal. If you think I remember each article that I've written over
there were a lot of articles. There were a lot of articles.
I stopped counting at 300. But yeah, so you can look up that article. There's a lot of things that you need, but the whole point is you're going to need a series of mentors. We're not in the Middle Ages where if you wanted to become a leather smith or a blacksmith, you apprenticed for 3 years, you learned skills that never changed, and he made horseshoes this way, you learned to make them the same way, and or the guy who would make the samurai swords from generation after. No, okay, that world doesn't exist.
Yeah.
What you're going to see is that you need to move into a certain area where you don't have those skill sets or those insights or those connections. But there's lots of people there. So the trick is how to explain the future in a way that people stuck in the past can comprehend. It took me 20 years to figure that out. I used to go and get into these meetings where I knew I was right, and I'd leave, why don't they get it? Why don't they get it? They don't get it. It's not their job to get it. They made it to the C-suite. Most people believe what got them there will keep them there. If that was true, the average life of a CEO wouldn't be under 5 years. It doesn't. You have to commit to lifelong learning. And one of the ways you learn is at the feet of people that have done it.
Yes, that's right. So this, I think, it's the right time to now to plug in where one can get your book. Like, for example, you can get on Amazon.com and on Zamit.com. Zamit.com, you can also get the book too. Yes.
On my website, I have free workbooks. So if you're working through the book, usually you're reading a chapter, oh my God, that makes sense. I want to put that to work. And then you get to the next chapter, and the first chapter just went through your mind and went somewhere, right? So I have workbooks that you can do exercises after each chapter to start making your plan for success. I don't charge for these. They're free. You go to jsamit.com, JAYSAMIT.com. There's no upsell. I don't sell anything. You can't get a t-shirt with my face on it, okay? Not that you want that. The other reason why the audio book or the printed book or the Kindle book, that's so the publishers can make money. So for the price of a lunch, you can change your life. And this is my selfish reason. Here's my selfish reason for doing this. I love democracy. I love living in a free country. But you know what? You cannot have a democracy without a strong middle class. The pandemic wiped out the middle class in the US and around the world. And if you don't have a middle class, you don't have freedom. So who creates the middle class? Who creates jobs? It's not governments. It's entrepreneurs. And yet no one's spending the time to teach entrepreneurs it's going to be a hard journey. But if I can shorten that journey for you, if I can ease that load, right? Running a marathon's really hard, but it's a lot easier because somebody made tennis shoes, right?
Yes.
So I'm just giving you that little extra help. Now, Vin, the young man that I mentored in future-proofing you, I don't want you to think he had it easy. He didn't date for a year. He didn't watch TV. He used daytime for selling and nighttime for doing the work, 7 days a week. But he worked harder than most people were willing to for 1 year, so he can live the rest of his life in a manner most people can't. I think that's a fair trade.
Yeah.
And to get him through those last couple of months, which was a grind. He just focused on when the year was over, he was going to take a year off and travel the world. And the only reason he could do that was not because he had a bunch of money in the bank, but because he knew he was future-proof. Whenever he wanted to work, wherever he went in the world, he could do it again and again. And today, he does have Fortune 500 clients paying him a fortune, and he just travels and does his work from wherever he happens to be.
Yeah.
So that is within reach, because if he could start with nothing, everybody listening to this has started with something that he didn't have. You're on a quest to get this knowledge, which means you're already taking that first step. And the steps to be a millionaire, the steps to be a billionaire, the steps to change the world are all the same. It's just one foot after the other. So if I can show you the step-by-step, at least it gives you a path.
And from the story you made mention of the young man that you helped. Yeah, I learned that, for example, he has this goal that after 1 year he's going to maybe travel the world. And the goal also could be, to be financially independent, for example, any goal that anyone wants to achieve in life. But in order to get to this goal, you have to persevere, as you mentioned earlier. Are there like some tricks, some tools to make use of in order to persevere? Because, perseverance could be easy to say, but to act upon or to actually persevere could be very difficult.
In future-proofing you, one of the 12 truths is taking perseverance and turning into passion. A passion is something greater than the self. So if you're just doing it for you, you can give up, because who's going to know it's you? I didn't set out to be an entrepreneur. There were no jobs, but I had 2 sons when I was very young. And I looked down at them and I wanted them to have a good life. I wanted them to have a better life. And I couldn't give up because of them. There are other passions that you can have. Anybody can sell shoes and make shoes. There's a company, Tom Shoes. Every time you buy a pair of shoes, they give a pair to somebody that's never had shoes. It sure makes people feel better about making that purchase. Yeah. It sure makes employees feel better about working at a company that has shared values. So the more you can solve for others as part of that passion, part of that purpose, the less likely you'll give up because you don't want to let others down. This is the whole psychology that's used in the military.
Yeah.
The reason why they beat on you and yell at you and everything is to get the whole bunch of you to hate the sergeant together and grow closer. So that when you're in harm's way, you're not thinking about, I'm getting out of here. You're thinking about, I can't leave my buddies there. I gotta do it for them, not for some obscure, freedom or winning the war. It's about those closest to you. So anything can be elevated. Tom Bilyeu, I don't know if you know Tom, who wrote the foreword to the book, Impact Theory. He wrote the foreword to Future Proofing. He had a software company. They were making money. They were fine. But nobody cared about it. And he came from a family that had people that were morbidly obese. And it bothered him. He wanted to help them. And he looked at protein bars that were on the market. And all the protein bars were filled with corn syrup. They were basically candy bars sold as health food. So with no experience, 3 guys started Quest Nutrition. They started making Quest bars that were actually healthy. A few years later, they sold the company for $1 billion. Their goal wasn't the $1 billion. Their goal was impacting those people's lives. And that's what got them through the tough times.
Yeah.
Vin hit something that I couldn't even make if I was making this into a movie as a plot point. Middle of the year, his business got sucker punched, or knocked over. Nothing that he did wrong. The world changed in a way that he couldn't have anticipated. And I'm like, okay, so it'll be a book about a guy who made $500,000. It's not as catchy, but it's still impressive. I thought he was down for the count. And at the end of the month, when we came for our end of the month meeting, his target was supposed to be $100,000 for that month. And he came to me and said, I didn't make the number. I only made $96,000. And he was beating himself up over this. And I was laughing inside. If he, when he was on welfare, could imagine him being upset that he only made $96,000 in a month. That showed that the growth mindset was inside him. When his business got knocked over, he said, okay, that's not working right now. I got to pivot and do something else. He didn't miss a day. He didn't mourn the loss of what he was doing. Yeah. He just said, okay, that's changed. I got to change with it. And that's what it's all about. We're the most adaptable species on the planet. I don't have to know the person hearing my voice right now to tell them that I believe in them. I know they can do it because I've seen others do it that weren't the smartest, didn't come from the right families, didn't come from the right cities, didn't come from anything. There's a man who I met who impressed the living daylights out of me named Molly, who was an orphan. His parents left one night, him alone in a small hut in Africa. He had to walk to the major city by himself. He lived on the streets. He saved up to buy a van and drive workers back and forth, and then he saved up enough to have another. One day, he's super wealthy. That should be the end of the story. But he went through the city, and he saw 3 kids in the street just like he was. And though he had 8 kids that went skiing in Switzerland and had everything, he picked the kids up, took them back to his wife, and said, we now have 3 more kids. And his wife was a little upset, but she said, okay. And he did this 22,000 times. Wow. He gave up his whole fortune. He had to figure out how to grow food for 22,000 kids in his house. Mm-hmm. He took every kid. And these kids are now doctors and engineers and teachers. He's transformed a generation because it was his passion. Yes. Amazing man. Wow. So there's always more than you can do. There's always a solution to any problem. Aren't we here to make life better? Isn't the purpose of life to have a life of purpose?
Of course. To make life better and to make impacts on our generation.
Yeah.
Yes.
Otherwise, you're just paying bills until you die.
Yeah. Which is a kind of a meaningless life, right? Just making money and to spend money or to pay your bills. Yeah.
It sounds miserable.
You answered my next and last question, actually. I wanted to ask you that, okay, after you've made it, after you're successful, what next? You have the money in the world. What's next? But from the story you narrated now, you could give back to the world. You could help other people to become successful in life. And that is what matters the most.
So it's not just about writing a check. So when Bill Gates was the richest man in the world and retired, He set up foundation. He could give away money, but I mean, that doesn't use what made him successful. That doesn't use his mind and intellect. And a friend of his said, you know, being the richest guy in the world's kind of cool, but you know what would be really cool? You're the first person in history to eradicate a disease from the planet. Now Bill Gates was engaged. Now it's like, okay, why couldn't people, if we have the vaccine for polio, why can't we get rid of polio? Oh, it's a distribution problem. I've solved distribution problems. Oh, it's this problem. It's a government problem. It's a regulatory problem. Now we had a purpose again. For me, when my kids were grown and that was no longer making more money and running another company, shoot me. I don't want to do it again. But an engineer that worked for me 20 years ago reached out. And to make a long story short, he grew up on a farm in the Midwest in the US in Kansas. And the way we grow food on this planet is we put poison to kill the weeds and to kill the pests. And we put what we believe is enough poison to kill everybody but us. Like if you think about it, this is the dumbest way to grow food. And it turns out that these poisons are causing cancer and killing us and killing all the fish in the seas and poisoning the land and taking the nutritional value out of the food. I mean, we've created a mess. So why do we use these poisons? And to make a long story short, because nobody had another solution to this problem. Same old thing. So Greenfield Robotics, this company, makes these little robots that go up and down row crops. Think of corn or milo or whatever, and they just cut the weeds. They use machine vision. They don't damage the plant. So think of a herd of goats going up a field to clean it, but they only take care of the weeds, not the plants. Now, what does this innovation do? So when he said that's what he wants to do, here's what it solves. The farmers don't have to buy the poison, so they make 40% more. People eat healthier foods, so they don't get cancer. Okay? The single largest source of carbon in the atmosphere of greenhouse gases is agriculture. It's 25% more than cars. From tilling the soil to chop up the weeds, we're releasing all the sequestered carbon. So it becomes the single greatest solution for sequestering carbon and stopping the heating up of the planet. How am I morally obligated? How can I sit here and say, I can go to the beach every day? So I'm chairman of Greenfield Robotics and working my butt off to make sure that these robots are everywhere to try to solve this major problem. There's always a way to do more.
Yes. I was thinking we'll talk about your professional. You are the chairman of Greenfield Robots, for example, but you made mention of it already. I wanted to ask you earlier, what does it do? What does it imply? But as an engineer myself, I know robotics has to do with building robots to carry out some tasks or some missions. But yours is basically for agricultural practices or works. Yeah.
When I was young, I got to interview a famous actor from decades ago named Bob Hope. And he said something that stuck with me. He was in his 80s at the time, and he said, it's better to wear out than rust. So I'm going to keep working forever as long as I can add value.
I've written a lot of notes right now. On my notepad, I'm just taking notes and from everything I've been able to learn from you today. But up to this moment, are there some things you would love to say that I've not been opportune to ask you? Is there something else you would love every listener to know out there that we've not spoken about?
I do this as my way of paying it forward. The knowledge is there. You're one click away from 14,000 years of knowledge of mankind on the internet.
Yes.
Everything that you need to have the answer to whatever problem you have is there. Or you can watch cats playing on the piano. I mean, the choice is yours. But thank you for the time, and love to hear success stories from people that have made an impact.
Yes, thank you so much for making time to be on this podcast or on this episode of the podcast. I'm going to place your information in the show note of this episode, your website, and also link to the Amazon, for the book for The Future Proving You. It's going to be out on the 18th of March, 2021. And it's going to be available on Amazon and other platforms that possible. So I would advise everyone to pick up the book and also listen to the audio. You have the audio copy, which was recorded by yourself, right?
Yep. If you didn't get sick of this voice, so the Audible's out now, the Kindle's out now, and by the time you hear this, the next week on Tuesday, the hardback is out. So enjoy.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to reading this book and learning all the 12 truths and all the principles that are listed in the book. Thank you so much.
Terrific. Thank you.
Wow, you made it to the very end of this episode. Thank you so much for listening. I'm grateful for your time, your love, and your contributions. Subscribe, like, review, and share this podcast. God bless you. Bye.